let's move on to the Springboks if you want to kick things off, Don. I guess might be worth us just sort of touching on some potential changes you see coming in that team that obviously won the World Cup final there. And how do you think strategically they will change, or will they stay exactly the same? What do you think?
Look, I don't know if you guys know, but everyone was basically released from their contract here in South Africa, or they were given the option to be released from their contracts, which was a big thing. So you've got players like Malcolm Marx that have gone now. They've gone. They're going to go play in Japan. So I don't think South Africa is going to have the same kind of access to the players. But in saying that, a lot of the players like Eben Etzebeth, they signed their contracts with the top 14 club with the proviso that they play against the Lions, because I don't think that the players can. There's no international thing to be released for the Lions, if I'm not mistaken. It's not like it's a traditional international. So I know a lot of them have signed to say, listen, they want to play. I just don't know if we're going to have. Richard asked this question a while ago. Will South Africa have access to their players the same way that they had for the World Cup? And I know that the Lions is big. It's just with this virus that's going around, and we've just been hemorrhaging players. I just don't think we're going to have full access to those players. And that's
if I may jump in again with the media there, I think contractually you might be right, but I mean, just imagine if a club said to a player, "You can't play for the Lions," the media would just destroy them. So I think they know how big it is, and it's just not worth it. Even if they want to, it's just not worth their while. Plus, they'll annoy the player so much that maybe they won't play well for them, or they'll just, I don't know, go off in a huff. So I think you're right with the contracts, but I think it will happen. I think they'll get who they want.
I also look at. I know a lot of the players are playing in Japan, and I'm not besmirking the Japanese rugby. I think Japanese rugby is super fast and it's very entertaining, but I don't know if it has the same kind of physicality that's required from, say, that you get in Super Rugby or you get in the UK. I don't know if it has that same kind of physicality, and I don't know if a Malcolm Marx is going to be a little bit not wasted over there, but this is a big thing to say because I've never said it to his face, but maybe come a little bit soft.
I don't think those words have ever been said before. Malcolm Marx.
I didn't say that. Don, I mean, look, let's face it. They go to Japan for the money. They don't go there for the rugby and to get better. The rugby, I'm sure, will be quick and skillful, but they're going for the money for a short period of time, and that's kind of it, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's one of those things, right? So you might play to a lower standard in between, but once you get back in that setup and back in the in that culture, right, I would expect it's very quick to transition back in and to find that standard again.
I do think there's going to be a few changes from the World Cup. I think there's been now a little bit more time to be able to be a little bit more selective about. When he went to the World Cup, I think they had a game plan. They had a certain amount of players, but I think now they can experiment a little bit more. The only problem is there's going to be very few internationals until we get to the Lions. I think if in a perfect world, if we had the end of year tour, we're talking 10 games towards 10 internationals, maybe maximum till we get to the Lions. That's a maximum. And normally you would have, at this stage, we would already have, from the Six Nations, you'd have 5, there'd be quite a few, maybe 20 games until the Lions. So maybe a lot of the players won't be rusty, but I think there's going to be very little international rugby up until then. So I think it's going to be a little bit different. I've got a feeling South Africa's probably going to double up on the physicality. I just think it's the way to go, especially on the half felt, is to really hammer, and just knock the wind out of your opposition. I think I feel that's the way they're going to go, personally.
Well, it almost became an attacking defensive mindset as well. It was don't waste too much time on the ball, put it up if you need to, and really hammer in defence. So I just can't see that overall strategy changing either. It was so successful.
I mean, it depends on. I know I've been wanting to have this discussion quite a while with all the proposed law changes that they want to bring in. Maybe some of those law changes will be brought in before the end of the year. I'm not 100% sure which, and all the law changes are really based around improving attacking rugby, which I think is the way to go. I think that there needs to be a few little tweaks tweaks. I'm saying tweaks. I'm not saying wholesale changes to improve attacking rugby. Because the defensive structures have become so good that they're really hard to get through. And I do feel there's going to be one or two tweaks. I don't know what you guys think if there's going to be any tweaks.
Just from what I've heard, I won't touch on this for too long, but from what I've heard, all of the talk is about improvements to the attacking style of play. So, yeah, I think, and also just the pressure on World Rugby to do something different and innovative now. There's just so much talk about, global expansions and just there's a real race to innovate rugby that I can see right now. So I do think that'll play a factor. I do think we will see some law changes which will improve running rugby. Will it happen before the Lions tour? I think so. I do. I think, now is a good time to make proposed changes. And there's time between now and the Lions tour to test them out.
Yeah, I mean, it's a whole video, isn't it, guys? Rule changes and whatnot. I think a couple of things I'd say briefly is a lot of what they can change to improve running rugby, for example, aren't law changes, is interpretation. Just literally the things that make massive difference is how long can you hold on the ground, what's not rolling away, interpretations in the scrum. So I don't like making wholesale changes for the sake of it when there's so much flexibility in the system to just change interpretation. I mean, you look at the up and down that's been going on with putting the ball straight in the scrum, and that's the law's not changed. Well, it has slightly changed actually, but it's a massive area for interpretation. And also, I honestly think you're not going to get a huge change with any law change until you go for something as fundamental as 14 players on the pitch. I'm not saying that's the way to go, but when these players are so big, strong and fast, there's just not the space on the pitch almost no matter what you do until you make a fundamental change of pitch size or number of players. Not that I'm advocating any of those, but anyway, that is a conversation for another day.
You're right. That's a whole video in itself.
Look, I still think I don't think the game plan is going to change much from the Springboks. I still think they're going to kick away the ball, let the opposition play with the ball, rely on their defensive structures. I think that's not going to change. I think that's exactly what Zach said. It's South Africa's attack mindset is defense, and that's just the way it is. Even if you look at how they've structured their coaches, even the coach, who's the Irish guy? It's the coach, and he's not there to as an attacking coach. He's there to
Farrell.
No. There's a Felix. That's his.
Oh, sorry, Felix. For
South Africa. Now he's there just to not as an attack coach, but more to see what the chinks are in the defensive structures of the opposition. So it's very, very defensive mindset that the South Africans have. But which is, if we were playing England play not a similar kind of game plan, but England's probably the closest to South Africa in game plan. Tactical kicking, around big pack of forwards, grind you into sand. I just think South Africa is going to play very, very much the same. I don't see them changing much from that.
Well, I mean, wouldn't it be great if we saw South Africa as a massive defensive set-piece team and the Lions going after the attack, and that contrast in styles, attack v defence, who wins? That would be, for me, that would be the most entertaining to watch. But you'd have to reflect that in some severe selections and some big players missing out as well, I believe. But we'll see.
Yeah, well, it reflects the style and the team that we just spoke about. I think, and some of the selections that we've all been collectively talking about the last few weeks is, there's enough X factor there in the Lions to really have a crack at this and to really throw the kitchen sink. So I agree with you. If we had that contrasting style, that would make up for an incredible tour. It'd be a real talking point leading in.
Yeah, and they'd have to practice like that in the warm-up games. I mean, it would be fascinating to see where these South African teams, the provincial teams, are going out there to, not beat them up, but kind of beat them up, and the Lions trying to practice a free-flowing, off-the-cuff game. That would in itself be fascinating to watch.
It would actually be amazing to watch, because traditionally, obviously, the Lions just don't have a lot of time together, so they've really got to come up with not simple game plans, but it's really got to be. It's generally you're relying on fundamentals and things like that. So it would be super amazing to see beautiful attacking rugby going up against the Springboks. I think that's the way to go. Personally, I think that's the way to go. Playing defensive games, I think it's defense on both sides, kicking away the ball. I think it's going to be the most non-entertaining games in the world.
Yeah, I mean, it would change your select. For example, going back to your team, Zach, I think if you were to go for that option, I think a kind of Thomas Williams 9, Finn Russell 10, Davis into 12, and Ringrose 13. The ball player at 15 and some finishes. That would make a lot more sense compared to what we might get. So it's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, Ringrose was one guy in particular I thought was very, very close. And if I can criticise this team again, it's probably that there's no wing cover. Is one area I would say is wing sort of fullback. Well, you've got Liam Williams here, so having a guy like Ringrose at least covers that base. And as you say, it's a bit more attacking mindset with him in there as opposed to a Davies.
And if they're playing attacking mindset, then they must have 3 backs on the bench for me, I think. Otherwise, we could get in big trouble.
Well, then you would look at a guy like, I mean, we know that there are guys here with really big engines like Curry and Tipperick, so that's where you would sort of look to them and say, okay, well, your position in particular, low rotation, you're expected to stay out there for minutes, and we're using X Factor in the back line.
Yeah, I mean, if I could get your thoughts on a couple of things, guys, just whilst we're talking about this. The starting team's one thing, but there's such a finite number of places for good players, and there's going to be big players missing out when they get down to the last 8 players to pick. Do you think there's players that are versatile are going to have such an advantage here over what players that can only play one position? So, for example, I think someone like Courtney Laws might sneak in ahead of someone who's an out-and-out second row. Players, backs that can kick goals, who can step in at 10. So, like Liam Williams is obvious. He could step in at 10 and kick goals, play 10 in one of the tour matches, the non-test matches. Daly, Murray could do it. Hogg could do it. I think that puts those sorts of players so much higher in the selection order, and players that maybe are just trusted to play, say, wing, are only fighting for maybe 2 places max. I don't know your thoughts on that and any players you thought of.
I'll jump in here. Just a general trend of world rugby has been moving towards dual role players. I actually think in many respects that's a mistake in certain positions. And I think Eddie Jones, some of his selections has sort of highlighted that, where he's playing certain players out of position. If I look at the Six Nations squad this year, for example, and having Tom Curry at 8, obviously versatile player, great player, can play 80 minutes, but you'd much rather have a specialist 8 there, I feel. I felt like that was missing from England. So I do think you're right. There is a point there that specialists will have an advantage from a selection perspective. I just think that's a mistake in certain positions. 6 is a good example of that. I think there's a real lack of a specialist. We call it a piano mover in New Zealand, but a guy who can just get people out of the way. Is just a bit more favour towards mobility and people that can cover dual roles. Where do I think that will impact? I think there's an opportunity for a guy like Ringrose, although he's very attacking mindset, someone who could probably cover wing there as well if you needed, over someone who's proven and been there many times, like a Jonathan Davies, who obviously is a specialist. 12, that's one where I'd probably look for a little bit more flexibility. Outside of that, I think 6 is a problem. I think Billy V, in terms of form, might be a concern. I also think replacement hooker is a big concern for the Lions. There's no one that really jumps out there. So, what do you think, Dom?
Yeah, I agree with you 100% about a blindside. I just think against South Africa you need a blindside. A traditional, like you said, a piano mover. South Africa have obviously got the problem that I think the Lions do have an upper hand is South Africa wouldn't be playing a traditional open side because Siya is not a traditional open side. So he does play towards the ball, but he's not a traditional fetcher at all. Very good at the counter ruck, but he's not a fetcher. So that might be a place where a chink in South Africa's armour. If I look at the backs, I know the back three, it's become quite fashionable. It used to be quite fashionable to obviously have somebody who can play the dual role fullback wing. So you're talking Ben Smith. Ben Smith's probably on a class on his own, but and Liam Williams is. I absolutely rate Liam Williams playing for Saracens. I just think the guy's he just knows exactly what to do at the right time, and I think he's really good cover for fullback. I honestly feel he's a better fullback than Stuart Hogg. That's my personal opinion, but you've got to put him somewhere, I suppose. Johnny May. There was a thing where the traditional wings were falling away. It was happening, but I think Johnny May, you've sold me, Rich. You've sold me on him. I think he's been watching him more and more and more, and I think if you think he's almost at a try a game, which is brilliant. So I wouldn't drop him at all. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to look at it and try to think. If I look at the South African back row, backline, could you put that graphic up, and then we'll see if there's a chink in it. I think so. If he took Gareth Davies, he's going to go up against Faf. Owen Farrell's going to go up against Handré Pollard. Mana Tuolangi is going to go up against Damien de Allende. Jonathan Davies going up against Lukhanyo Am. Johnny May against Cheslin Colby, which I actually don't think Cheslin Colby is going to play there, but that's Makazole Mpimpi going up against Liam Williams. And fullback, the only one, Stuart Hogg won't be going up against Billy Leroux. I think there's going to be a replacement at that point. And I think Owen Farrell's, I think they're pretty evenly matched, Owen Farrell and Handré Pollard. Mana Tuolangi and Damien de Allende, both evenly matched. Jonathan Davies, I think, is just outweighs Lukhanyo Am in attack, but I think on defence, I think they're both fairly close to each other.
The only thing I'll say on that, they're similar players to a degree in that the decision-making centres. So, you could say one's better than the other, but they kind of cancel each other out in the end.
I think so. I think Cheslin Colby's going to be. Cheslin Colby's, I think, is on another level when it comes to. Oh, geez, did I just disappear?
No, you're there. Yeah. You're fine.
I think Cheslin Colby's going to be a bit of a handful, but is Cheslin Colby going to move to 15 or bring in a different wing? It depends. Coming to the pack, so just tell me if I'm talking too much.
Keep going.
I think if you look, Billy's going to go up against Dwayne. Tom Curry's going to go up against Siya Kolisi. CJ Stander against Peter Steff. I think that's a bit of a mismatch. Mario Toja, James Ryan, that's Eben Etzebeth, and that's a big call. Who the hell's going to go up against him? I'm going to call it Archias name, and I think it's going to happen. Rory Sutherland's going to go up against Frans Malherbe. Jamie George against probably Malcolm Marx, and Tide Furlong against Steven Kitshoff. The one thing that South Africa has now lost is obviously they've lost the beast. So I'm not saying there's a huge big drop from the next players, because the next player is probably Liza Gaboko, is probably going to be the next player that's going to come through. But I don't think he could go up against a Carl Sinclair. So I think there's a real strength there and tight head for the Lions. Loosehead. Yeah, they're going to go up against Frans Malherbe and Vincent Koch. So I think they're fairly similar. But I do agree with you that Vincent Koch and Frans Malherbe are props. They don't bring anything else to the party. But yeah, if I think about it, they're pretty evenly matched across the whole park. The only two concerns I see is dealing with Cheslin Colby and Blindside. Those are my